I think a part of it is that you have to realize that whether you like it or not, you are going to be held accountable at some point for your actions and your choices. And when you're a leader, you're going to be taking care of and caring about the people that you serve, just like as when you're a teacher, you're a leader of that classroom and you care about those students and you want them to be successful.
Welcome, my friends, to the Teacher's Lounge, where the coffee is strong, the ideas are buzzing, and the conversation is even stronger. I'm your host, Mik Love, and we're here to discuss how culture, created in the classroom or the boardroom, can elevate us all. I have some fantastic guests that will join me in having this conversation, and I look forward to it. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, because this riveting conversation is one you don't want to miss. Well, we're talking about a concept that many know, the word of accountability, but it has different contexts as we use it. How do we create an environment where our students can thrive and it unlock their unique genius as individuals? How are we as educators creating an environment to where the classroom can work together and have this cooperation that starts to happen when accountability is a part of that? And then as those students move throughout life and they leave the four walls of those classrooms or whatever that learning space is, how are they taking accountability and deploying it in the real world to where it shows up and shows out for them? So my question to you is, how do you create an environment for students to thrive with accountability being a bedrock of that?
Accountability means to me to a point where you're putting students or adults, whoever, in the right mindset to be able to make sure that they're doing what needs to be done, then having some kind of a system in place to be able to say, hey, are you getting this done in the right amount of time? Making sure that students, specifically in my class, where students are on a time management schedule type, where they need to be getting things turned in on a specific time frame. But just I always like taking it, not saying, without making it sound mean, keeping people in check. Mm-hmm. Just to where they're like, this is where you should be, this is how you need to get there. I want to be able to help them and guide them through any way that I can to help them complete that final step.
I think something unique about accountability is it is very similar to culture that I heard you talking about earlier. Culture has this uncanny ability to show up regardless of intentionality. Mm. You could be completely unaware that you are creating a culture of accountability or not, and experience the outcomes of that, whether they're negative or positive. And I think one thing that's truly magical about education is we get to see this as kids move through institutions. I think elementary teachers can really capture this idea better than most. When a first grader moves to second grade, that child probably carries some of the cultures from the classroom that they experienced as a first grader, and they carry that into their second grade classroom. And now you've got a mix of students who probably also came from other classrooms, and this teacher now who's trying to set a new stage for those students. And all of those experiences that those students bring to that new classroom is going to be a part of what that new culture becomes. And so I think there's a certain part of this where we have to be flexible and understanding of where people come from and adapt that into our worlds, while also being intentional about the culture or accountability that we want to set either in the workplace or in the classroom.
I love that. You mentioned two words, intentionality, and of course the main word, accountability. And so how do we get the buy-in? How do we get buy-in from those individuals who may have had a negative experience with accountability? How do we create this new culture that we're driving and we're not just existing in? How do we go about that? And Brandon, jump in to that point, because I think both of you and here at the lounge, we don't showcase the problem, we showcase those who are saluting for them. Right. And so how are you going about creating an environment for those things to permeate?
Do you care if I take this one?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'm really excited about this because I really struggle with this a lot.
All right.
And I recognize where there are times in my life where I've not been accountable to myself or accountable to others. And I think as a teacher in the classroom or as a leader in an organization, there are going to be times when you fail, you make mistakes, you let your people down. And that's hard to admit. But if you can create a culture where you're modeling to your students that it's safe to make those kinds of mistakes and that they can hold you accountable and that you treat them with respect when you experience those situations or difficult times, whatever it might be, if you're able to model that and show that it's safe for you to fail, and then also model that in return to your students, that it's safe for them to fail, you can sort of create that space where accountability is a discussion towards our growth or our collective growth rather than a punitive, like, you messed up, you're in trouble, you know?
No, like, lean into that.
No, I just lay it out for them. You know, I just tell them this is what needs to be done. This is how, the only way that it's going to get done is by you doing it. I'm there to facilitate and help them get through those steps that they need to be able to get to that final step. You know, to where it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm just like, what can I do to make sure that they get to that next step? So that's why I tell them I'm here just to guide them and facilitate them to be able to get done what needs to get done.
You touched on something that is something that I never even really explored with it, but accountability has this negative connotation almost. It almost seems punitive when we mention it in a way or how we exercise it with our students. How do we remove that that negative connotation and have people start to embrace this idea like, I want to be more accountable. Because I'm more accountable, we get better results?
Even in the schools, I feel like we use the word discipline also in a negative connotation. You're getting a discipline referral, you're being disciplined, but it's just like accountability. It's a choice towards growth. And if you are choosing to be disciplined, that's very different than being disciplined. Maybe sometimes being disciplined is also a choice, but it depends on which direction it's coming from. Are you choosing it or is someone else choosing it for you? And I really think that's where this comes from, is when we create these words in those negative spaces, then when someone tries to have these difficult conversations with you in the future, you might feel defensive. And I know, like, that's something that I really struggle with, and I've gone through myself a lot, is when I feel that feedback, it's tough to just sit there and be like, okay, I've got to take it. I've got to listen right now, see what I can learn from it, see how I can grow.